Okay, part 3, Randi Green here. Again, instead of looking at the Syrian A, Syrian B races of the White Elder Strand, that became what we know as the Druids or the Celts, or the original people that were to administer the gate system in Britannia, linked to the crystal ground and the original holographic network of our reality field, and in that way also called the gatekeepers. We have the Ankh, blue flame, reviving reification technology in Egypt, and we have the priestly lineages in Asia, or the original civilizations that wandered there as part of the groups, the 4 groups from Atlantis. And we have the red-skinned that I have decided not to dive into here because the wound and the pain, the collective pain there has not been cleared in me yet. So that's another level I have to work with to get to the true story, beyond the myth, beyond the prophecy, and beyond what they recalled and what they have recited. And it all comes down to the reception of our current understanding and the correct context to fully grasp what these stories, myths, prophecies are all about. But it is the big playbook that leads us to the reconnection to the 6th dimension, or the supposedly, once they were sent to 4 corners of the world, they would then become prosperous, multiply, and learn what they needed to learn so that they eventually could reunite and rejoin the original civilizations outside the enclosure. I want to tap a little bit into another understanding here, is that we have 2 main groups before the enclosure that were to administer the enclosures and the gate systems in and out. We had what later became the brotherhoods that were supposed to be the proponents of the councils, which then got taken over 15,000 years ago, and aligned with some of the negatives in the D10, and the D11, and the D9, and the D8, and making our solar system what it is today. And then we had the other side that were under the D10 collective, the Lemurians, that were to take care of the gate systems that were associated with the East. You see, these 2 main factions, we can call them East and West. We can call them different groups of the original civilizations that were part of the administration and overseeing of the reseeding of the 4th cycle. The 5th cycle had that, at that point, gone dormant. It had been, due to the laws of the cycles, it was no longer visible in our system after our 5th planet blew up. It was transferred other places to other systems, although the inner Earth still had the original version of the blueprint, waiting for the different civilizations in the outer rim, that is the outer Earth, to reach that level where they would walk as an upright human, no gender here, upright human that would align with the original consciousness potentials of the previous civilizations, aka the holographic template. So that were to be kept behind a firewall, so to speak, literally speaking, because to be able to get to the 5th cycle, as we know, the ones that are there must be in full capacity to administer the forces of the cross as it turns into wheels that either administer the transformational forces of fire, the transformational forces of water, the transformational forces of soil, or the dense level, the solidified crystalline patterns, or enabled to work with the forces of the wind. All of these are not what we understand and have been portrayed and shown later on as a kind of magic, which is not. It is the different levels of the consciousness potentials, how it expresses itself when it comes in contact with the energy units of the previous cycles, sometimes supported by technology, which was one of the greatest mistakes of Atlantis. That's why the fifth cycle fell, because they got too aligned with the use of technology and less with the original hard opposition dynamics of the fourth cycle, where the transformational abilities involves discernment, wisdom, and kindness that comes from the heart for the highest good of the many, in the true understanding of what it really means to work collectively as a team to assist and upgrade and unfold the true potentials of our reality field, mirrored into us as the rods and the lightning rods of this knowledge. Which leads us to the staff. The Celts and all of the ones that have the ability to understand the connection point between earth and the heavens, they hold the staff. The staff is a representation of this bridge between the outer rim and the true understanding of what the heavens are, because it's not above as in the out there in the universe. There are groups that can go through some of the gates of the other planets, which is why we see them coming from quote-unquote space, but they are literally just using gate systems from other constellations or planets in our solar system. Because there is no space, as we understand of it. That's the void we're looking into. That's why we're seeing nothing. But the staff is the symbolic representation of the one that masters the 1-7 pillar. Okay, so you get these are important symbols when we understand the dynamics of energy and consciousness. This is not magic. This is dynamics of energy and consciousness, symbolized in folklore and mythology and all sorts of hidden secret language to remember what it is. And part of the path to understand this is to get through the distortion, the myth, the folklore, the astral barrier programs, which are falling apart as we speak, and get through our own personal distortions that, due to the mix of the races that happen with the extraterrestrial colonial programs, imbued the three lineages and their falling dynamics and consciousness potentials into all humans on the planet. And I'm pausing here so you understand what I'm saying. So that means that some of the genetic modification projects that they began when they colonized our solar system, got rid of the councils or got whatever's left of the council to become part of the colonizing groups, and with that took over our entire solar system. What was left to be what was supposed to be for 3 specific lineages that got reseeded, they then took everybody through wars, through colonization, through means that are unpleasant and unheard of in any system, mostly because some of the groups that were part of the 2-8 pillar had then got too far into, we could say it began with the councils taking away the revivification technology of the Assyrians. That probably sent the entire 2-8 pillar to its knees, let me put it this way. And there were some of the first wars were, of course, happening over the gate system that were going into inner Earth as well as to the Lyran system. And whatever's left of the Lyran system is now under control of Vega and the D11 collective and they aligned with the negative forces of the Draco system. So we can just say that when we look at the entire template of a universal structure, there's not much left that we can say these are the good guys. They have moved beyond via the six-dimensional gates to other places, because if you can't unify in the sixth dimension, you must segregate. At that point, there is no in-between. There's either or. In the sixth dimension, either you unify in what we call the positive end of the spectrum, or you unify in the negative side of the spectrum. And once that happens, once the entire quadrant and the entire universal structure has undergone that process, and we stand on each side of in the sixth dimension, that's the cosmic war that everybody is getting ready for and has been getting ready for, and everything is a prelude for that upcoming future galactic, cosmic, final divide of the different groups that spilled over from the previous universal cycles. Once we understand that that's the playbook, the biggest, large, galactic, cosmic playbook, because it's going to happen in the 7th, 8th, and 9th dimension, what happens there with that final cosmic war will either take what's left of the gate systems into the hands of the ones that are on the descent, or into whatever's left into the hands of the ones that is on the ascent, elevating out and into life force, or descending and letting go into realities driven by technology and no life force. Very important to understand. You don't need life force to be a life form. You can be without. The 7th dimension, the Arcturians, are a clear manifestation of that. The android, the semi-organic races. The D8 is absolutely an exemplification of that. And what's left of the original D9 collective, which is so sparse that it's barely there, and that's because whatever was left there were overridden by since they were very, what we call, true to the original Andromedan system, because they hold the gate to there. So that was shut off from the Andromedans, and these races slowly fizzled out, ceased to exist, and what was left were re-engineered or either became part of the 8th dimension or became part of the D10 collective under the Dracos and the Lemurians as their assisting, helping groups. Most of them are probably what you would call re-engineered types of soldier civilizations that are used and being sent out here and there for whatever is needed. Some of the groups that are left there we know as the Mantids. We also know some of the Tall Greys and some of the other groups that are very high in feature or tall, slim in feature. For whatever reason, these are different expressions of what they used to be and what they carry of what's left of the original Andromedan strain, or strand if you like, but of course highly re-engineered and distorted. They cannot access the Andromedan system. So what you are to understand in this history is that the gates were closing and have been closed from the different groups that were progressive, and that's also when we talk about what is progressive is within ourselves and what we generate. That allows us to get in contact with what was the original solar system configuration and architecture, and from that we can build whatever we need to build to whatever degree we can build, so that we can reach the different gate systems to get us out of here. Do we need to go physically to Egypt or physically to Britannia, which more or less, the one in Egypt is sealed off. It's not fallen, it's not destroyed, it's sealed off. So technically, if you have the right configuration in the 6th dimension, you might actually be able to use it, but it's difficult to get there due to what's going on in Africa. as in get to the 6th dimension vibrational state that will allow you to go through the gate. Not really. If the environment has fallen into a configuration that is super low, then it's these gates, they can't open, because you as a human in this form, unfortunately, we will mostly align with the surroundings or the environment around us. That's important to understand. The one in Britannia, as we know, has solidified, and no, it's not Stonehenge, but it is. It's in the 5th, and it's there, but it's. Anyways, it's a Trinity gate, so it has 3 access and entry points, and it's not just in one location. So that should be important pieces of information. It's old Atlantean technology, and the Celts were giving the knowledge of these gates. Now, we can ask if the black hair that went from Mesopotamia or Babylon or whatever it was called at the time and went to the north, what they were interested in. And some of these groups are the descendants of the Anunnaki or the Lemurians. And as far as I see, they were migrating out of the original project that the Lemurians took on under the D10 Collective when, as part of their reseeding program. So that ties back to what I wanted to talk about. We have, with the reseeding, 2 versions of reality, East and West, where one were run by the D10 Collective, that's the East, and the West were run by technically the D11 Collective, but to enable through the processes of the 4th cycle into the 5th cycle, as well as the East were also to go through the 4th cycle and into the 5th cycle. So that's why we have similar teachings on both sides of the pond. They were to administer this, so D10 in the East and D8 and D9 in the West. Okay, so now we got that one squared away, so to speak. Within these 2 overarching groups, there were subgroups, and they were called sub-races that were seated in at the same time. So this is very important where you understand we had 4 groups as part of the Tree of Knowledge that were reseeded as part of the Atlantean project, having specific teachings that would assist the groups that got the possibility and opportunity after the fall of Atlantis to redo their deeds within specific lineages from where they would finalize their lineages going back to the original 3 lineages that had the floor. And then you will ask, what about the 4th? Because this is a cross. And the 4th was not part of what we call the 3 lineages that had the floor, but actually a 4th lineage that became the overseeing lineage or the teacher lineage or the one that was supposed to assist them, including a 5th lineage that would be outside this reality field. And the teachers, the ones that were supposed to teach this as part of the 4th lineage that were part of that project, not the 4 groups that were reseeded as part of the Tree of Life, but the 4 groups of the teachings were the ones in Inner Earth. So now you have got the different groups, as I talked about. You have got the priestly lineages that went to Asia as part of the Yellow People, and I'm not including China here because they turned into something completely else later on. When this happened, there were no people in China whatsoever. That's incoming later. But the Indus Valley, as we understand of it, and they were to teach the transformational processes of how to turn the cross above and below, inside and outside, into the wheels of transformation. Hence, the transformational teachings, which later on became secrets of the priest and how to reconnect with the quote-unquote gods, building temples and whatnot, or keeping it within specific lineages that then took advantage of it and used these forces for personal gain, as we know with the Rajas, building high cultures and different forms of systems that are called Tantra. And Tantra just means, similar like we have teachings that are put into a specific type of order with specific type of rituals. It doesn't necessarily mean what you understand of Tantra up here in the West. There's nothing to do with that. Look up the words, what that actually means. And with that, splintered off into subgroups that then took it onto themselves to figure out how to do this individually, ending up with the last great avatar from that branch, now known as the Buddha, teaching these systems for that lineage that was seated there. And that completed the projects of Atlantis, and with that, the teachings would then fizzle out and cease to be, as I have explained in the Avatar and Teacher podcast. So with that, we understand that that's the end of the priestly lineages and the transformational powers and the dynamics, how to do that. And we now understand in that context the chakra system and all the teachings that came from that. And we can put it in a box and say it's historical, and that's very interesting. And we are now moving beyond that, those of us who participated in the projects there. Okay, so there's so much information that needs to be put out here to understand what's going on today. As step one, the priestly lineages of the transformational powers of the wheels, the cross that turns into wheels, I'm deliberately not mentioning it by name here, they have completed, and they completed with their avatar, the Buddha. So that means the lineage is done, and whatever comes out of there are typically scavengers or other groups that go in, take over the thought forms, take over the temples, take over the vessels, take over whatever's left of that original lineage, and then do whatever's left, the remains, the residuals of these lineages, and make it their own. And these are often groups that are coming in from other parallel systems that are associated with the fourth dimension. And that's how an entire part of our reality field can begin with one seeding of a civilization and then eventually turn into something else. Again, remember, this happened after the colonization, and with that, there were very few left of the original lineage that had what we call a true affiliation with the original lineage that were part of the reseeding. The projects in Africa got shut down, and Egypt is just where the gate was, but it encompasses the entire Africa. That was completely shut down, and that left anger within the Osirian races that were connected to the 8th or the 2-8 pillar, and they began a very elaborate scheme where they began to align with different groups from other parallel universes, where we can call them black hole universes, or where the use of life force has turned into the forces of death. And that means descent. There is no longer the possibility of elevation. And once that is understood, you also understand why none of these groups can ever return to the original progressive lineages or the original gate systems out of here. They only have one possibility, and that is to keep themselves going as long as possible, either via technology or via war or via segregation or division, or via any other forms that will allow them to keep themselves going, including a type of crystallization that allows them to harbor what we call a crystallized type of energy field that freezes in the descending regression. The regression is technically connected to the fourth dimension. So it's kind of descending inversion dynamics as part of their consciousness units that belongs to the fifth cycle. And these were the ones that really got into trouble throughout the times of Atlantis. Okay, so we have that understanding of that branch, of which the Celts were having their technology and the insights, the white group that were reseeded as part of what we know as Britannia. But technically, it actually covers the entire northern hemisphere, including Canada at the time, to a vast degree, again, you will ask, where does Russia fit in? At that time, Russia, whatever that level of our planet, were under ice. That's an even older history that about the Caucasus, the Caucasians, the original lineages that came there, and that's a completely different group. That's a project that goes so far back that my mind can barely get there. But they, of course, are on the rising, including the Rhine groups that would belong to the 1-7 pillar that took over China. And since the lineages of the original priestly lineages of the transformational powers of the fourth cycle are no longer present in Asia, well, then you begin to understand why that is now being occupied by groups from outside and has very little to do with the original solar system civilizations. Colonization. Okay, and then we have the Lemurians that pulled out in 2016. And with that, what we understand is the old world order began to collapse, and the Dracos pulled out in 2020 and left what was there for the scavengers and whatever was left. And all of this is now completely dissolving and falling away. And we're seeing that the area around Mesopotamia, what's left of the Indus Valley towards Mesopotamia and the Black Sea and these areas, they are now falling under the Dark Ones or the Falling Angelics. The Falling Angelics belongs to the Lemurian projects. They are a kind of a re-engineered superhuman that were... The Lemurians tried to splice in different types of genetics that would be aligned with the 7 heavens and the 7 rings beneath, from where the ones that were working with that technology would be able to work both with the progression dynamics, but also do the transformational forces and the transition dynamics in the older levels of reality, the 7 rings below. And that's technically what an angel is, or an archangel, one that can work above and below. And we have the stories about what that led to. And the ones behind this technology, the top level of that one was Assyrian. And when we talk about what's left of the ones that were angry, they rioted against this technology, and the Lemurians, the Syrian there was in collaboration with the Lemurians. They rioted against this and created their own factions. And I'm getting so tired because it's just the same story that just gives the foundation of what's going on right now. These groups are later understood and known inside our reality as the Baals, the controllers, the administrators, that lost their prerogative to have kingly lineages, but remained as part of the trade system, from where they continued into what we understand as some of the groups as the elite, some of the groups that were part of... I talked about this in some of my other podcasts, so I don't want to go there because I already covered that ground, that level of history, which you can get on my Acast series of the dysfunctionality of our reality field and what we're dealing with here when we talk about these groups. These groups are the ones that... So when we talk about the polarity that's going on right now in America, for instance, we're talking about some of the 2 major groups from East and West that were polarized in their old battles of the original programs of the reseeding. And that's very important. That's the highest level we are dealing with here, that are represented and were represented as part of either the brotherhoods that came from Egypt and that gate, or the ones that fell into the hands of the colonizers, or the other ones on the other side that were part of the ancient gate systems that we now know as Iran and Iraq and that whole area. And that makes sense when you begin to look at some of the issues that America has been involved in, because the last battleground for the last lineage is now in America. Either it can rise up to its full potentials, or it can begin its complete descent into the forces of the civilizations that were once there. The groups that went there as part of what we call the Calvinists and the Puritans that we didn't want in Europe, they went to America, and they are typically associated with either branches of what's left of the Mesopotamian branch or some of the groups that are associated with the Brotherhood branch of Egypt. So that's the old world order that you know of it, and they're continuously internal battles of left and right. So you have that scheme. That is changing now because these groups belong to a world order that no longer is there. And we have got new groups on the scene that are under the 2-8 pillar, and some of these groups that are now taking over the world because they got angry originally with the division of our reality field and the reseeding programs. Okay, so that's another piece of the puzzle, which is a dynamic I am not eagerly going into right now. But to get the background information, I'm here putting this one out so you understand the history. And with that understanding, some of the dynamics of what's going on the top level right now in America, where these groups of the old that did not complete its part of the one of the last groups of the fallen lineages, they have now chosen the Americas to be their playground for their final completion cycle, where they either become part of the Great Divide or become part of the Great Unity. And I think it's Blavatsky that talked about the cosmic race that would rise in America would be either or. And the Hopi prophecy talks about the same thing. Either we reunite with the original solar system civilizations, for many now in mythology associated with the Great Spirit. But the matter of fact is the Great Spirit is within ourselves. So we reunite with our original potentials and capacities, and by that open up our consciousness potentials to the multidimensional aspect of reality, where we either join the Great Divide or join the Great Unity. Okay, so with that, it leaves for one last podcast, which I will generate shortly.